Hey everyone, I'm going to go through a slightly complex and strategical game today in the CCC11 round 2 game between Stockfish and Komodo. Again, this is 30 seconds on the clock each with a 5-second increment, and Stockfish was playing white in this game, Komodo was playing black. And Stockfish played e4, c6 was the book move, and the book continued d4, d5, e5, bishop f5. After bishop f5, this is the end of the book line. But both sides seem to play very standard moves anyway. Stockfish continued with knight to f3, Komodo went with e6, bishop e2, knight d7 and castles. Again, Komodo continued the standard move knight to e7, Stockfish played c3, h6 was played. What this move does is give the bishop at f5 some space and also stops white from infiltrating with a knight g5 or bishop g5. So this is very standard stuff so far. Knight bd2, and Komodo played the move a5 and Stockfish met this with a4. So again, fairly standard. So Stockfish just counters this a5 move and says no, you're not getting some space on the queenside. Komodo retreats the bishop back, and now we get some interesting play. Knight b3 is played, knight to f5, and Stockfish continued with bishop to d2. But now it gets a bit weird. Komodo played the move knight to b6, obviously wants to play knight to c4. But weirdly here, Stockfish now, after playing bishop d2, actually played the move bishop c1. This is because if now he plays knight c1, Komodo can play knight c4, attacking the b2 pawn. This can be met with b3, but then black takes on d2, and after queen takes d2. So as we know, computers really like the two bishops, and for some reason Stockfish decided just to play bishop c1 to stop Komodo gaining the bishop. But then Komodo retreated with knight to d7, and Stockfish again played bishop to d2. Komodo continued knight b6, and Stockfish didn't want to draw straight away. He could have played bishop c1 again and repeated. Instead though, Stockfish did finally go in for this line with knight c1. I don't think, obviously he didn't want to, but he's going to have to if he didn't want to draw. So Komodo played knight c4, hitting the b2 pawn. b3 was played, and now knight takes d2, queen takes d2, and all of a sudden white has lost the two bishops. But still, the position isn't that bad. As a human player, I wouldn't be that fussed, really, to be honest, losing the bishop for the knight. But it seems quite vital for computers. So I guess they must think the bishop is more powerful than the knight. Bishop e7 was played by Komodo, and now bishop to d3 from Stockfish. And I like Komodo's play now. They just play the move h5. So what this does is stops any funny g4 ideas from white, and prepares a kingside onslaught. Stockfish played knight to e2, and after this move Komodo just goes all in with g5. Preparing g4 and launching just a massive kingside attack. So this is very exciting stuff. Stockfish retreats the knight back, and actually here Komodo continued the move h4. I think Komodo should have been a bit more cautious and played queen c7. This is a Stockfish move that was given. Stockfish could continue king h1, but then now Komodo can castle queenside, and after knight to g3 takes, rook df8, bishop takes h7, rook takes h7. It's still rather even after knight to d3 and g4. I think both sides have got fairly nice positions. It's probably really even. But again, black doesn't really have any weaknesses, and I think they could be proud of this position. Instead, Komodo continued in the game with the move h4, and Stockfish met this with the move h3, so trying to blockade these two pawns. I like Komodo's next move, king to d7, just making way for the queen to join the attack. So this is very nice so far from Komodo. I do like them in position, but Stockfish is no slouch. And Stockfish now counteracts black's attack with their own counter-attack, b4, trying to gain some space on the other side of the board. A takes b4 is played, and now c takes b4. Queen g8 was now played by Komodo, but maybe rook g8 was an option as well, and I get into a really complicated long variation that I went through with the computer here. For instance, Stockfish would continue with b5, and I thought maybe Komodo can continue with g4. And if takes an a5, we get into a rather complicated position now after c5. White could continue with takes, and if bishop takes, there's b6, and black can take on b6, followed by a takes b6. And after rook takes a1, there's queen c3. The point is that after rook a8 to move the rook away, it looks as though black has just won an exchange, but actually after bishop b5 check, king e7, queen c5 check, black is forced to play knight to d6, and that knight is now pinned. White could afford to move with knight to d3, black continue with h3, and then there's g3, f6 to get rid of this pesky pawn on e5, but Stockfish could play f4, and play continues rook a5 to try and pin this bishop on b5. White will be forced to take on d6 with check. After takes, queen c8 to not trade these two queens off, rook takes b5, rook c1. Komodo continues with queen takes b6 and king h2. And it looks as though Stockfish would have lost this game, but actually they have this resource of rook c7 check, and black will be forced to take queen takes c7, otherwise it'd be mates very shortly. So queen takes c7, queen takes c7, king e8, and we've got a perpetual, which would have ended this game in a draw. So this was a very long position. Started from this rook g8 move, where I went through that massive variation. But back to the game, queen g8 was actually played by Komodo in the game. So Komodo is pretty much going all in here. And they got 4 pieces on the king side. So Stockfish did the right thing and played b5, aiming for the other side of the board, and Komodo continued their own attack with g4. I think as a human player I'd be relatively scared of Komodo's attack, but Stockfish is really known for their defensive skills. They play queen to b2. The point is they're now attacking this b7 square, so rook b8 was played, and Stockfish hides the king in the corner, king h1, and the point is that it's very hard for black to actually attack this king now. Even after g takes h3, g takes h3, there's actually very little black can do. The two knights on e1 and e2 are very strong, and maybe even white could play rook g1 at some point to get rid of this queen on the g file. Back to the game though, Komodo didn't actually take the pawn, he played f6 in this position. So trying to get rid of this e5 pawn, and maybe even preparing the move c5 by getting rid of this d4 pawn once f takes e5. Stockfish continued with the move a5, Komodo took on e5, there's d takes e5, and now Komodo played c5. So it looks as though black is consolidating. But actually this is a trick of the eye, because Stockfish hits with b6, and now controls these light squares. The queen could come into b5, or the bishop can come into b5, and black's king is in a lot of trouble. For this reason Komodo hides it with king to e8, preparing to move it to f7. But now Stockfish comes up with another magnificent move, just a6, preparing a7 and launching these two pawns right up the board in Komodo's behind. B takes a6 is played and rook takes a6. The king hides to f7 and Stockfish dumps it on a7, so has a very nice attacking rook now on the 7th rank, and all of a sudden Komodo's attacking potential turns against him. Literally black's king has no protective pawns and is using the power of the pieces to try and protect itself. Queen g7 was played by Komodo, and Stockfish tries to infiltrate with knight to f4, just putting their knight on a more dynamic square, perhaps even preparing a knight to h5 where it can jump into f6 because the bishop is pinned. Komodo played knight to d4, and this unleashes the bishop on h7, so just trading off, bishop takes is played, queen takes is played, and Stockfish now actually comes up with a very nice move. Rook takes e7, and after king takes e7, the point is that now queen a3 is a very strong move. It can take on c5, or it could play queen to a7 and start infiltrating the 7th rank once again. Also the point is that this c5 pawn is actually undefendable, because if they play rook hc8, then white can play check and skewer the king against the queen. And if the other rook moves there, they can play Queen A7 anyway. After King F8, they can play B7. And after the rook moves, let's say Rook E8, then Queen takes C5, King G7, and Queen takes D4, and white's got a superior position. So after this Queen A3 move, Komodo just plays King to E8. There's literally no other move they can play really. And Stockfish takes on C5 and now attacks the knight on D4. Komodo took on H3, Stockfish took as well, and I was thinking maybe why doesn't Komodo just play knight to F5? Well, the point is that now white can take on E6 and has an amazing attack with this knight, possibly jumping into the C7 square. There's Queen C6 ideas as well, so this is very nice for white. So back to the game. After G takes H3, Komodo continue with Rook G8. Stockfish now played the move B7. Queen takes D4 was also an option. Komodo would probably continue with check, and after takes, Stockfish still has the advantage. They can play Knight H5 if they wish. If Rook G5, there's check, King E7 and Knight G4, which holds everything together, protects this pawn. I guess Rook takes B6 will be played, but then Knight G2. Stockfish still should win this endgame. Perhaps they thought they could win quicker because they just played the move B7. And after Queen takes B7 and Queen takes D4, there's no way for black to trade queens, so maybe this is what Stockfish wanted. Play continued with Queen to B1, preparing maybe Queen E4 again. But Stockfish doesn't want to trade queens, so they play Queen A7. Rook B7 is played and Queen A6. So now hitting E6. So Rook E7, Queen A4 check is played and King F7. And Stockfish plays Knight to D3. So holds on to this E5 square, blocks the Queen from playing Queen to E4, and play continues. So D4 was played. I think the point is that now Komodo wants to play Queen B7 check. Doesn't really do anything actually. So Stockfish just sidesteps this, so King H2. Queen B6 is played to protect the D4 square. Stockfish played Knight to F4. Komodo played Queen to B1, and finally Stockfish took this pawn on D4. The play continued Queen C1 and Rook H1. The point is that now Stockfish wants to get their other knight into the game and try and wrap up this position. Queen C6, Knight E to D3 and Queen F3. This looks still quite scary for white, but Komodo doesn't really have an attack, and Stockfish just calmly plays Rook C1. Rook B7 and Knight to E1, so hits the Queen retreats, the Knight goes back, and the Queen is blocked out of this attack against the White King. Rook E7 to again protect this E6 square. Rook A1 hits the Queen, Queen B3, and Stockfish plays Knight C5, so attacks the Queen, and everything is pretty much defended. The Queen on D4 does a great job of protecting F2. There's Queen F3 once again, and finally Stockfish takes his pawn on E6. So actually Komodo just kamikazes here, plays Rook G3. F takes G3 works very well here, because Queen takes G3, King H1, check, King G1, check. But Knight G2 just blocks all the remaining checks, and again this should be winning for Stockfish. But obviously Stockfish is a much better player than I am and just played the move Rook A6. Just knowing that Komodo doesn't really have an attack. Komodo goes backwards. Stockfish plays Rook D6 again, and now again Komodo kamikazes, Rook G2. Stockfish just takes, and that's a free piece. Komodo takes on E6. Check. King G8. Knight to F4, attacking the Rook. The Rook moves. Stockfish plays E6. Threatens mate on G7, a very nice move. And Komodo plays Queen to G3 and sacks the Queen for no good reason. Stockfish captures. There's check. King Knight to G2. Check takes. Check check. King F8, and Stockfish mates with Queen H8. Checkmate. So that was a fascinating counterattack from Stockfish. It looked as though they were under pressure early in the game from Komodo, who had a nice kingside attack. Very good attacking play from a very defensive opening, so I'll take note of that if I ever play the Kh1 actually. But again, Stockfish did very well in counterattacking on the Queenside. And if you want to view the game, I'll post a link in the description below. I'll also copy and paste what I've written in ChessBase, so you can copy that into ChessBase if you want to go over the game. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed my analysis of this video, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. If you did, please drop me a like and maybe even subscribe if you want to watch more in the future. See you next time.